So as you're beginning to see, when Canadians and others get together at their respective tables going towards the G8, G20, they'll have a lot to talk about. I'd like to ask Sandhya Venkateswaran to close off the commentary, and then we'll go to questions and more free-ranging comment.
Thank you, Jerry. Let me just raise 4 or 5 quick points. The first point is addressing poverty and enabling the universal access of health and education is and needs to be the responsibility of the state, of governments across the world. It is not something that can be left to the markets, because markets can neither ensure universality nor equity. Perhaps in recognition of this, the G8 had made certain commitments, resource commitments. Estimates suggest that we're hugely short of those commitments. It has been estimated that we are short of $23 billion per year of the commitments that were made, which roughly translates into 3 million lives saved or lost, depending on whether the resources are gathered or not. These are numbers. What does this actually mean in a real sense at a national level, at the level of those who are suffering? To give you an example from India, the government of India made certain commitments with respect to health, guaranteeing health to the population. The promises were not kept. Therefore, today we have a situation where rather than a strong public health system, we have actually a very strong private health system. The private health system obviously doesn't cater to the poor. In India, the poor end up spending 80% of, not the poor actually, at a country level, 80% of health-related expenses are borne out of pocket. And to put this in perspective, compared to Canada, where 30% of health expenses are borne out of pocket. For a country like India, which houses a large proportion of the world's poor, just imagine what the implications of this are. The implications are that people take loans or sell assets to be able to take care of their health needs. It is estimated that 40% of hospitalization expenses are actually borne out of taking loans or selling assets, putting people deeper into poverty. Governments make multiple promises, whether it's the G8 or national governments. What they finally do is perhaps not quite related to the promises that they make. What they finally do is what's political. And we have the whole situation of what happened with the banks staring us in the face. Commitments were made with respect to the MDGs, but finally, resources were channeled to rescue the banks. Rescuing the MDGs, obviously not a political mandate, rescuing the banks were. That's where the role of civil society comes in. How do we ensure that the governments actually keep their promises? We have to make these issues political in order to make them sit up and listen. Can it be done? Of course it can be done. India has huge examples of the role civil society has played in holding the government accountable. Some have covered considerable distance, some have not. But let me give you some examples. In terms of resource allocations, we just had our budget for 2010-11 announced, and there's been a 56% increase for the Ministry of Social Welfare and Justice, which basically addresses the needs of what are called scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. In terms of policies, the government has incorporated for a while now something called gender budgeting, which measures the outcomes, which basically links up investments to outcomes for women. And a large number of ministries are actually preparing gender budgeting statements to monitor the outflow of the ministry's funds with respect to outcomes for women. Third, there have been legal changes. Civil society has lobbied for and achieved a whole lot of new acts in the country. One of the most path-breaking acts is something called the Right to Information Act. Much is said about corruption, about accountability, about transparency. The Right to Information Act empowers every citizen of the country to ask a question about resources, what was mobilized, what was spent, how it was spent. And the government officer is required by law to respond to that query. The civil society has lobbied for and achieved something called the Right to Education Act, which basically makes education a legal guarantee to every child in the country. Currently, civil society is lobbying for a health act, and there is a draft health bill in place. There are innumerable other examples where civil society has played a role. So what I'm trying to say is civil society has a voice. Let's use it. Canadian civil society and the global civil society needs to speak up. G8 is concerning itself with decisions around global governance. Global governance is not just about the G8 countries. It affects directly and indirectly the lives of the poor across the world. These decisions have to be inclusive. They have to hear the voices of the poor and the voices of the southern countries. Let's ensure these voices are heard. Thank you.